Tremendous performance. Let's give him another round of applause. That was amazing. That was amazing. I'm here tonight with my wife, Christine. It's date night for us. One of the themes here, I think, is date nights, maybe, perhaps. But I think all of us were moved by this performance. And in my life, in my job, I don't see the type of violence that was described in this play, although I see violence. And I see violence on a regular basis. And I want to talk a little bit about the three types of violence that we see as a society, because I think each of them calls for different solutions or different approaches. The first, of course, is what we witnessed here tonight, the horrible, horrific situation where someone in your family, or maybe someone you never knew, but you see on TV the mass murders that occur, whether it's at Columbine or Sandy Hook or Virginia Tech. And our lives are all set back for a brief period when that happens, because as was done so well here, we can't imagine something going so wrong, so terribly wrong, that would lead an individual to just completely try to kill a classroom full of children, or a college campus, or a movie theater. And so it's difficult for us to understand that, because it is so extraordinarily bad. That's not what I witness in my job. In my job, a job I absolutely love, and when I was asked to do this, I said, well, I don't want to do it before the election because I'll be a little agitated. I might be a little bit more relaxed after the election, which I am. But I do see violence in my job. And unlike what we saw here today, what I see and what I experience is what our police chief, Edward Flynn, describes as slow motion mass murder. And what it means when he says slow motion mass murder is not just in Milwaukee, but nationally, what we see is violence, gun violence, that disproportionately has an impact on young African American men as the victims, as well as oftentimes the perpetrators. But it's not just African American men. Sometimes it's young Hispanic men. The perpetrators oftentimes then are young Hispanic men, or young white men. And the perpetrators then are most often young white men. So there's an element here of anonymity for most of us, because most of us aren't young, and most of us aren't young men of color. And so what do we do about it? What's our response as a society? How do we deal with the issue? And I'll get to that in a second. But the third, and one that garners a lot of headlines, of course, are those horrific attacks in Brussels and Paris and other places where, again, we can't imagine what's going through someone's mind who's completely lost all connection with trying to make this a fair society, and just decides that they are going to kill as many people as they can, including themselves. So the question always comes around to guns. It always comes around to guns and mental health. And I just want to touch on those for a second to just get the conversation going. I felt that the best moment that I had ever seen, when I say best moment, that's not a really good way to describe what I'm going to say. The most likely moment that we would see meaningful gun laws was after Sandy Hook. But when we as a nation decided that over 20 first graders could die in a classroom and we wouldn't change our laws, that made me think, will we ever change our laws? Will we ever change the laws? And I don't know the answer to that. But we have to understand the cultural divide in this nation. So you have an understanding, and I've witnessed this firsthand. I've won elections, I've lost elections, and guns have always been a part of it. And I don't mean to be flippant when I say this, but there are certain neighborhoods, not just Milwaukee, but in other parts of the nation, large cities, where if you're walking down an alley and someone yells, duck, you duck. If you go up to Vilas County and you're in a field and someone yells duck, you shoot the duck. And I'm not trying to be flippant about that. That'll tell you that there's these worlds that are so different, and the ability to understand those slow motion mass murders as opposed to something that happens very infrequently, is one of the reasons I think that we're unable to deal with this issue as a nation or as a state. But mental health is the other thing that we hear. We hear that over and over and over again, and of course it's an issue. Of course it's an issue. But I don't want us to use that as an excuse not to do something. Because oftentimes you'll hear people say, well, mental health, we have to invest more in mental health. Of course we do. But it's not simply because of this. So what I would ask in our conversations is, how do we deal with these issues? Again, they're different issues. There's the horrible mass murders, there's the slow motion mass murders, and then there are the international murders, if you'll call, and how we as humans can change that. I don't know, I don't have the exact answer. I don't think anybody has the exact answer. And then how do you deal with the issue of guns? The Second Amendment is here. The courts have an interpretation of it that I think gives her a very expansive ownership here in the United States. But we can't end the conversation and say, well, that's just the way it goes. Because at some point, someone in this room will be affected by it. It may not be you, but it may be a grandson. It may be a neighbor. And we can't just ignore it. So again, I want to thank the rep for putting this on. I wouldn't say it's the most relaxing Sunday night I've ever spent. But I think it's certainly one of the most thought-provoking evenings that we can have. And I think we as a community owe it to ourselves and owe it to others to have a serious conversation about how we can deal with these very serious issues. So again, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. Have a great evening.